try and point out some interesting facts about bees here. We've got these little honeybees on the remaining flowers of an aloe plant that has basically been decimated by some go-away birds. But if you have a look at how they're busy going about their business, interesting thing is they've got a very good sense of smell, and they can actually detect from a few meters away if a plant, or a flower should I say, has actually got any pollen or nectar. Now bees are actually looking for both substances. Everyone talks about bees making honey. You can actually see the bee at the top here at the moment. It's got some nice orange patches on its hind legs. Now that is actually the pollen that is being collected in so-called pollen baskets. Essentially what happens is when the bee is flying around in the air and on its way to the flower, and then the constant buzzing around from different parts of the plant to others, as you see here, it basically develops a static electricity, a negative charge on the body, which actually attracts pollen to the body. It doesn't even need to really brush up against the plants, but or the anthers. Then that pollen actually sticks to hairs on the body, typically called scopa, and then through combing of the legs, the pollen is collected in these baskets on the hind legs, sometimes on the lower parts of the abdomen, clusters of hairs there, and they basically take the pollen back to the hive. Now the pollen is actually used for a variety of things. These are the workers that actually go out and forage, and then you've got the hive workers. So the hive workers take that pollen and they actually mix it in with nectar, which the bees here are also collecting with a little tubular tongue. They collect nectar from the flowers if nectar is present, and they store that in a, for want of a better word, a crop. So we've got some birds disturbing us over here, some wood hoopers. And essentially what happens is the storage in this honey stomach, as it's also called, is a place that the bees will keep it and then take the nectar back to the hive and then actually transfer it, regurgitate it into the mouths of another hive worker bee, who then injects or secretes an enzyme into it, which helps to break it down into different sugars, from sucrose into fructose and glucose, and then it essentially that passes around quite a few times like that. Each time it's happening, the nectar is being dehydrated. So honey is essentially dehydrated nectar, and then ultimately with the buzzing of the wings of the bees in the hive, it also helps to dehydrate that nectar to a very low moisture content, and then ultimately is stored as the honey, which we all know. And the honey is used by the bees themselves as a food source, especially in the winter months, also to keep warm. It helps to insulate the hive as well. It's nice and dense, and then it's an energy source, and it'll be used also to be fed to the larvae and so on. And now what happens is this pollen that we're really interested in, where the pollen is actually used to help make the hive itself. All the walls of the little hexagonal parts of the hive that everyone is familiar with, it's chewed up. Some of that pollen is then mixed in with the nectar, like I said. So the nectar usually is quite translucent, but then obviously mixing it in with pollen and a few other things along the way, it takes on its lovely golden color. But the hive itself, the pollen is used to add integrity to the structure of the hive. And then what happens is that the honey, which the bees are actually consuming themselves as a major food source, they have wax producing glands on the body, lower parts of the abdomen, some of the segments. So you can see these pollen baskets quite nicely now. See the nice big orange cluster. And essentially what happens is these wax scales, which are secreted, very, very fine, thin scales, clear scales, are basically dropped in the hive, and the workers inside the hive actually collect these, chew them up, mix them in with pollen again, make it a little bit darker, and ultimately then build the cells of the hive. So that's where the wax comes from. Essentially pollen and honey are and nectar that the bees are getting from the flowers are incredible food sources. They supply the bees with everything they need. You've got proteins, you've got carbohydrates, you've got fatty acids, you've got everything you need there. So and lots of moisture, of course, as well. So certainly one of the most important natural foodstuffs in the world. There's very few other food types that can actually compare with honey, if any, for the amount of nutrients that they supply to a living organism.